Hopefully we will not exceed my knowledge base, but we'll see. I mean, that's not that far to go
It's already
between.
exceeded my knowledge base, so that's where we start with. By the way, like number one, half of us don't even know how to properly pronunciate this software package. Is it Logos? Is it Logos? It's Logos. Let's throw that out there before the callers call in, even though there's no callers today.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Logos.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm depending on the arrival of our own personal um, devil's advocate. We'll see how
Crozer
this
is
goes.
joining today, if that's what you're saying. Yes, he
Yeah,
will be here. And
that's the myth. That's
you
the
know,
myth.
we should have just brought Crozer in live to this little video, so we could have just had a conversation and humiliate. I mean, encouraged him
Still an
directly in front
option.
of
Still an
everybody. Still an
option.
option. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
but again, we're
Crozer,
going
you
to
want to
be.
join in? Just let us know. We'll throw you in here
Yeah,
quickly.
well, yeah. It probably will be a while for him to figure out how to press all those buttons and stuff to make it
Well,
work.
plus he's got to get his phone set up just right, and he doesn't have a tripod really, and he's like trying to stack up the right number of books, and yeah, it's one of those kind of things.
Yeah. So anyway, our focus again is talking about Logos today, about some of the ways you can use it as a, and I'll talk about my perspective to it as we get into it, but just to understand the mechanics of it, how it uses. Before we get though, there we have two key things of importance. Number one,
The
Terry.
question of the day.
No, no. How are you doing, Terry?
You know, I'm all right. I mean, it's a week and a couple days out from my favorite holiday, so from that standpoint, I'm doing really good. So I'm a by the way firm believer. No Christmas till after Thanksgiving. I have an inflatable turkey at the head of my driveway. The snowman will go up on the day after Thanksgiving, but until then, we are a Thanksgiving family. I'm just going to throw that out there.
All right. All right. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine choices.
No,
To
no trees, no
wait.
music, none of that
Yeah.
stuff.
We don't have any official end of year holiday decorations of any kind up. We do have our fall stuff up, but
See, I approve of that.
all that
Right now,
stuff's
you're still
up.
in pumpkin and hay weather. That's what this
Right.
is: pumpkin and hay, some corn stalks, big inflatable turkey who's named
Absolutely
Tom.
true. I think I marked today as the official start of Georgia's, and other states are already ahead of this, but Georgia's dad is saving money by forcing the family to wear two sweatshirts season. And so that's the start of this season. Like, you touch that thermometer, we're going to have words
I had
season.
a child yesterday morning woke up and said, "I froze, turned the heat on," and I said, "Put on more clothes."
Yeah, it's that season down here.
Not yet.
But states to the north of us, you're probably already there.
Yeah, and that's
We just
okay.
arrived. We joined you guys today, at least
That's
in
right.
this household.
Yep.
So here is a question. I do have a question for you, Terry.
All right.
Um, your favorite holiday themed movie?
Elf.
Elf?
Elf is it. Elf is Elf is my favorite. Every part about Elf, by the way. Like I love Elf so much that when they show Will Ferrell sitting in his dad's lap, I just start laughing uncontrollably. Like it's that funny to me. And that's what drives my barometer for a good holiday movie is it's got to be funny.
Right.
And so it's Elf. My wife is It's a Wonderful Life. That's her favorite, and I just don't like to watch that. I just don't. So I'll leave the room. But Elf, if you turn on Elf, I'll be there. In fact, if you turn on Elf, probably any time of the year, I'll sit down and watch Elf. It's just that funny. Every part of it is hilarious to me. He's an angry elf. He smells like beef and cheese. Every part of Elf, I love every part of Elf.
There's no problem with that.
Yep.
Elf's funny. We'll probably watch it. We watch it every year, I think. But for
By
us,
the way,
it's
close second is Polar Express. Let me throw that out there. Close second.
that had a season in our house. We watched that for a season, but our kids are kind of at a point where that's no longer the thing that they request. Actually, every year we sit down and watch White Christmas together.
Oh
That's a
no,
big standard in the family.
no, you're an
Um,
old person, Phil. You're old.
Whatever. I
You're
love it. I
old.
think it's the music is great. It's funny. It's endearing. So, I don't need Will Ferrell's sometimes hilarious over the top acting. Um,
Sometimes
Sometimes it
that is
fails. Sometimes
that
it
is
drops.
all the time. Like it may not succeed, but it is always over the
Yeah.
top, and it's usually pretty hilarious.
Yeah. So don't need
Yeah,
that every time, but it'll probably make its appearance as well.
I,
It's going to have to fight for space because this house apparently is a Hallmark zone starting
no.
today.
Like
Um,
no. You've watched one Hallmark movie. You've watched them all.
I
Like
didn't say
that.
that this was what I was doing. I was
You
just
need to quit
speaking in
letting
terms
Jill
of
and
the
Hallie
house.
decide what you watch. I'm just going to throw that out there because I know it's not you and James. So let's just be very honest about all
Um,
of that.
I'm present, but I may be reading in that
James is
same
with me
space.
watching Elf. Let's be honest. That's where James is at in this whole process.
um, anyway,
Yeah.
let's dig into the matter at hand, and hopefully we'll be able to work through this. We are looking at Logos. And Ruben mentions Home Alone for us. The Home Alone one, I think, was
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. The
You
other
gotta go down
two,
for
like,
that.
yeah.
Um,
To put that in a category of movies that did not need a sequel. That's what the Home Alone series was.
Definitely. But they made like five. It feels like maybe seven at this point. Who
By the
knows?
way, that Jurassic Park and Transformers all in that grouping. But one quick question. This is very important. Die Hard, Christmas movie or not?
It's a Christmas movie. It's
What?
in Christmas. It is like
No, it's not.
100%
No,
because
it's not. No,
it happens during Christmas.
no, no. That's ridiculous. No wonder you watch White Christmas. All right, let's get to Logos.
All right, talking about Logos. We have a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time. We'll try to get to those. I put a link for those who may not be familiar with Logos into the chat. It'll bring you to one of the current cheapest options if you decide that that's something you wanted to do. And so it's a way in which, if you wanted to do it, but don't go and buy that thing today, especially if you're not familiar with Logos, because this is not go buy Logos. This is like if you own Logos or you're curious about it and you have questions, let's understand it better. And I'm going to give a quick take into how I understand Logos to kind of fit into our toolbox as evangelists, teachers, preachers. So the history of the software helps us understand what it's trying to accomplish. It comes out primarily of a program called Libronics, which is intentional to talk about a library. And so the biggest part of the Logos program is functioning as a library with a librarian on call. And so Libronics, which is now Logos, started as this library that you had a really efficient way to organize everyone and everything in your holdings.
And I got my first structured Libronics software outside of Logos. That was something that they brought in, if I remember correctly. Which, by the way, should surprise all of you that I know that much. But by the way, the Do the Work DA is here. But I remember, and I think it might have been a Nelson Publishing software thing that I got that put Libronics on my system. This is probably 15, 20 years ago in a very crude format. I don't know how old it was, but it was a long time ago. And then eventually that became part of the Logos system.
I'm sure there's a wiki page somewhere that'll describe all of that. But
Yeah.
the bottom line is the biggest chunk of what makes up the Logos suite of options comes from its ability to manage your library of various types in an efficient way. And so we'll probably do some screen shares and show a few things that help with that. But that's like the background of it. Now, within that, your library is going to contain primary language texts, which are original language stuff, and then all the translations that you might have into other languages, your own language, and on top of that, any commentary type text and any history type text and any fact book you may have. And so you're going to have maybe some commentaries, maybe some writings of folks from antiquity. You're probably going to have the equivalent of encyclopedias. They're all going to be in there too, as well as, in a more modern sense. What's up, Daniel? You're going to have, multimedia included as an access point in Logos, which includes videos, instructional formats, courses. You can see, I think actually Lebronix bought into Logos, might be the outcome, but at this point they're the same. The companies are well beyond those mergers. Logos keeps buying stuff. They're basically like the mini Apple of their little empire.
Technically, I think Faith Life is the umbrella over Logos and even Libronix at this point.
I think so.
To
I think
some
that's
degree.
how it functions.
Yeah.
So again, that just kind of helps us understand what it is, because if you don't remember that, sometimes you allow yourself to limit what you think you can do within the Logos suite. The Logos suite also includes all of the devotional work that Faith Life does. They do a lot of devotional publications, whereas
and very important on that, by the way, Phil. The free book a month, let's throw this out there, is not just on Logos, but you have to go to Faith Life. They have a separate free book every month that you need to make sure you check out for Logos users.
Yeah, well, at the end of this, one of the things I'll try to do is recap the most cost-efficient ways to step into Logos in a way that doesn't break the bank. Because one of the most common complaints and questions that I do want to deal with is, Logos is too expensive. Like, that's literally the most common question that I hear about it. And so I'm saving that for the end of the conversation, is both addressing the cost and then the ways that you could reduce your expenses in getting into it. Nothing is free, even though their free books are free. They're more of a service within the package itself, to a certain degree, because there's other components to it. So here's some key questions that came up. We'll try to start with them in the pre-roll questions, and then we'll get to that big one at the end. And in the middle, we'll answer any new ones that come on. A couple of folks asked about searches within the language that they want to pay attention to. And within the language, I'm talking about Greek, I'm talking about Hebrew. It also works within Latin at times, depending on what you're digging in. Those tools are called different things in different programs. I know Edwin and I both used to use extensively, and I think he still uses, BibleWorks, a really, really good language program. It wasn't good at much else, but when it came to Greek and Hebrew, it was and still is my preferred interface and database for working with the original languages. The only reason I don't use it is it's no longer supported or available in going forward. It's like the company's closed. It was partially absorbed in some degree by Logos. They kind of made an offer to kind of let you get that same stuff at a discount. It will still work if you own the software, but it's not being updated. And so as software increases on the operating system side, it just doesn't work anymore. By the way, if someone wants it, I think I still have a PC edition of Logos lying around. I think it's not Logos, but BibleWorks 5 or 6 or something. Send me an address and I'll send it to you. The first person who wants that, they can have it. Clear it off the shelf. So that's what I had before. What we're going to look at right now, though, is some of the search tools that exist inside of a language here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share a screen and pull that up. All right. So this should have my Logos open, and there's a couple of things we can look at real quick. To start digging through the language side of things, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. And so I think it was Edwin who asked some basic things about language interconnections and how do you search for them. And the search is actually split into a syntax search or a morphology search. And I think I gave him a link to it in those questions, and I'll probably pull that link up again in a second. But it simply starts actually by pulling up a search, and you pick out, yes, Ruben, we're available on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. So Terry's loving that. Twitter, the Periscope. And so the YouTube link is in the notes for this broadcast. You can just kind of scroll up there, and it's shareable everywhere if they don't want to use Facebook.
Number one religious broadcast on Twitch. Phil's favorite promo line.
Yeah. Let me just double check. Not today, though. Shane and I were the number one on Twitch on Sunday. On Sunday, but unless someone pops onto the Twitch feed, it's possible someone could be ahead of us right now. All right. Really simply, get back to our question that Edwin had brought up earlier. You've got two searches that you can pick from. You've got your morphology, and you've got your syntax. And this is really simply how you begin to work within the language. And because Logos functions to its own standards, it's really simple. You type in G or H to figure out if you're going to do Greek or Hebrew, and then you type it in the transliterated form. And you can search with a Greek or Hebrew keyboard, depending on your skill level, and you can dig into it. You can search in whatever text that you own. And so you can dig around in various language baskets. And so these are what I've got in my package. And so I can dig around in there. I can dig around for the morphology side in limited chunks of the text. And so I can use the whole Bible. I can use Old Testament, New Testament designations. I can use the Apocrypha, just the Old Testament law sections, and really just search away for it. On the syntax side, which is more narrow to what Edwin was getting at, the same rules apply. And so you build a query in it, and you just basically start digging through it. You can go through and search, like he was asking, for every place this word combination occurs, where every gender or plurality might occur of that particular noun. It's all in there. And different folks have different values to it. One thing I'm going to point out, though, these are where you do the thing. There are some great simplified videos available for free on Logos that explain how to do this function. But because we're trying to keep this particular video less than an hour, we're not going to do a bunch of searches in each of these areas, in part because it also requires us to have a larger knowledge of the original languages. And there's a lot more stuff we want to cover. But everyone, if you want to talk about it in person, or like just the two of us, we'll open up a separate thing later and we can set up a time and kind of work through some of these searches on a specific level. But I don't want to be language specific because I think our audience is much bigger than that of what questions we need to answer. Terry, real quick, do you got anything?
Well, so I'm not a language guy, and so what you just covered is pretty much close to confusing for me. But
that's why I wanted to just kind of hit it real quick and then move on.
And I say that because I think one of the things I want to point out is I use Logos a lot, and if you're listening and you're not a language guy, like you don't understand even what morph and syntax is, that doesn't mean that you won't get anything out of this. In fact, one of the most useful things for me is in the language, basically, that takes a passage and does the word for word search, and that would be over on the left side of your screen over there. I think you have that tab pulled up. Maybe it's the one that's hidden.
No, I use it elsewhere, but
yeah. But in that function, what allows you to have is it goes word by word in the verse that you're looking at. That is it. And
yeah, I pulled it over. It's a tab.
Yeah, and that allows you to, if you're not a word guy, that allows you to kind of see things that you wouldn't normally understand. Kind of dips your toe in the water. But there's also a function in there where you can click on that word, and it even brings up a graph of how that word is used in different texts. And I find that to be, for a guy that's not a language guy, that helps me out tremendously. It's that circle graph down there, I think, if you pick that. And that helps you to figure things out about this word that you would otherwise not know because you're not a language guy who would go and do a search on morph or syntax. So I just point that out because I think there's a tremendous benefit for people like me who can't begin to try to type into a Hebrew or into a Greek keyboard. But I can go here, and if and even like you just showed down there, you can click on it, it pronounces the word for you. you have a lot of things like that that are really great for things that you're looking at. So it shows you the frequency of the word, where it's used, how it's used. That's a tremendous help for a non-language person. So I think
Right.
that's just one of the things to throw out there, and
Right.
kind
And
of
here's the
kind of to the people like that are probably more in my category.
this is very visual, and that's one of the benefits to it.
Yes.
The neatest thing for me actually is this little tiny chart up here. Anytime I look at the words, I go to this little spot, and it shows me the word usage throughout the Bible. Like, how common is it? Where does it see its prevalence? Like, where is it used the most? Um, I want to add one more thing, and that's a clause search, which doesn't require you to have a deep knowledge of the original languages whatsoever, but it allows you to, again, use these very simplified search terms, similar to what you would use in the internet search bars, to include clause searches. So senses, to write, to communicate, they all can be included. So agent, John, son of Zebedee, verb, to write. And so you can search by those two things. And then you just, click the link, and as an illustration of it, it's going to do a clause search in that original text and say, well, I can't find it there. But if I go obviously to where he would be, and kind of dig that up, we're going to give
Always
you an
important
answer.
if you're searching for John to be in the New Testament.
Yeah. Of course, I'm still clicking the wrong buttons, but that's normal. So
I'm
there you
so
go.
glad we have you here as our expert.
Yeah. Extent of knowledge doesn't go that far. So then, boom, it shows it up. And so you got 29 results where John, the son of Zebedee, is connected with him writing something. And so it's just a real simple feature that works in the English language, but it shows you in the original language. And so you
Right.
can see that analysis take place, and you can get cool little, push outs and results that talk about all the details about it. And so you can have everything from its verb forms, which Edwin probably is really interested in, to all the other details about it. The whole sentence is graphed out. If you're a diagrammer, this is a sentence diagram spreadsheet if you want to know what's going on there. And so it's all in there. All right. More language stuff later on another day, maybe in a give and take where some longer discussions could take place. Going forward, Terry, I know we talked a couple of things beforehand about the ways that you use Logos that are new to you. And we talked a little bit about the sermon builder, the sermon manager, but also just basic note functionality.
Yeah,
Um,
so I'm not into the sermon builder or manager yet, so that's not where I'm at. And I think the sermon manager is a Logos 9 feature, is it not?
it is. And so
And
I'm
I
going to
don't
pull
use, yeah. So you can pull
that
that up while I
up.
talk about that. Let me say this: I don't have Logos 9, and as I've told Phil, for the amount of money it would cost me to upgrade right now, based on my current skill level, I don't think that the value is there for me to make that purchase. So, and I think that's something you got to consider. You've already kind of touched on that. We're not saying you should go out and buy Logos 9.
Right.
Now, if you have 9, or if you're just getting into this and you purchase 9, hey, this is a really neat function that Phil's about to tell you. I can also do this same thing in theory on Excel. It's just in a different place, and it
Yeah.
does not give me some of the cool features that Phil's going to show you. I'm just saying you can still do that without upgrading this basic thing. So to me, the newer things I've been doing is really the note taking. And so from that standpoint, if you've not got into that, that would be the most important feature to really dive into, I think, for anybody who's just figuring this stuff out. But go ahead and show them the sermon manager, which is a great function, and I love this circle chart that comes out, and I think it's fantastic. It makes for a really neat graphic. So go ahead and explain to them what you have there.
The graphic is the outcome side of things. What's
Right.
important about it is it gives you an option to help figure out how to do a sermon plan, a preaching plan, a teaching plan, if you're not familiar with it. And with that, it includes some tools that will improve the efficiency of preparing your classes and sermons when you sit down to do them. So let me just talk about at least a couple of key things you do when you start out. Let's say you've already figured out roughly what you're going to teach for the year, not your preaching plan. I'm not talking about that. These are your Bible classes. This is your bread and butter of the building up of the church in these communal settings. And so for us, we've got 2 set up times where we're going to be meeting in some fashion together in adult classes. This is the adult class setting, but it does overlap into our studies of all ages. And so we're going to be going Samuel King's Chronicles, and then the Gospel of Luke's, a special series, and then the Acts of the Apostles. And so those are our sections, and they're blocked off. And so I attach them into where they go. And so if we look at Samuel, we'll learn that Samuel is a Sunday Bible study. It's going to take place with the East Side Church. You can kind of see I'm highlighting where that is down here. And those are things that you'll put in when you add the series. And you can add these in chunks. You can add all 20 of your sermons, all 20 of your classes in one thing. You can include the various, and I'll show how that happens in a second, the various topic information, the text you're going to use. You can include notes that you have planned ahead of emphasis for each week. You can include audience limiters. If you're going to use a liturgical calendar, like some of the, sometimes you can look at how the Bible lays itself out, and there's some great value to that. It's not a negative thing. It's just the way that the Bible story kind of relates to the cycle of the seasons. You can do that all in one step. And so boom, it's all planned out. Now the benefit then comes, that's already pre-slotted into your prepared sermon builder. Like it's already there. And it categorizes everything. It also will allow you, when you're doing that, this is a neat thing, holidays. You can preset holidays across the table there. And those holidays can be U.S. holidays or other calendars you want to import into Logos. And then you can know that Martin Luther King, these are national holidays for the country that kind of pop up, President's Day, obvious ones that impact, either your work, tax day, or other aspects of importance. Cinco de Mayo, always a great taco day. Need to have that one, included there, Mother's Day, all that stuff. But they're all in there too. Here's the efficiency. That's all planned. We've already sat down, like Terry talked about. We've made our Excel spreadsheet, and now we've planned out our sermons. We know that I'm going to cover Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, in 20 sessions. Maybe I've already pre-slotted the passages that are being covered in each of those sessions, so that's already there. So then we can go produce. I need to add those 20 sessions. I'm going to use my blank sermon template for it. I'm going to say it's going to be starting on January the 7th.
That was actually February the 7th, but still.
It's fine. And then I'll say it's only going to be on Sundays, or it's going to every first Monday or whatever. And I add all 20 of those at once. After I've gone through and built all of this information about them, because you can go through and include all of that about the sermons. So you add those in. Here's where it becomes an efficient thing. You go back to your grid, and now it is the beginning of the calendar year, or even before then, and you're going to get ready for your look into, let's say, what will be our first sermon of the cycle. And I'll open it up and pull it out. And so I think that's a separate little page that pops up here. So I'll have to stop this share and reshare to the new one, because it opens it up back in Logos, and boom, there it is. So this is the first of 4 sermons that are part of our annual series. We got 4 main sermons with it, and they're labeled to begin with 1, 2, 3, 4. Walking with God 1, walking with God 2, walking with God 3, walking with God 4. And already anything I've already pre-slotted comes up. And so the date, the location, the service is already in there. For some of our series, the text is already in there, the topic can come in there, etc. Now that's already attached. Notice that it identifies for you this is a planned sermon. So you're working ahead rather than back. You can also attach a specific notebook to the sermon. So over the course of your year, you can add clippings or citations or notes ahead of time so that when you open up for the sermon, that notebook is not on a separate tab like I tend to do over here. It's available right in the sermon document you're working on. And so it pulls it up with it. And you can keep tagging those notes in there over the course of the year to have those specific. Maybe it's a great illustration. Maybe it's a citation from a book. Maybe it's an anecdote. You put it in a note, you attach it to it, you forget about it until it's time to write the sermon. And so that's how that note feature can work really quickly to make this process more efficient. Let me talk about notes real quick. I know that Terry's using those, and maybe some folks will have questions about note use and all that. Let's see. So notes, Terry, you said you started using them. What way are you using them right now?
Well, so the main way I use those is when I'm studying a particular topic or maybe through a book, and something pops up in a resource material, and that could be a lot of things. It could be a commentary. It could be another book that comes up in your research that would apply. My main way I do that now is I will copy the sections of those commentaries into the notes of that book, and it'll highlight next to that verse or word in some cases that section that I think is particularly important. So that's of tremendous value if I know I'm going to be preaching through a book at some point, or maybe I'm just doing sermon prep now, but things come up that aren't even for the sermon, but I think they're of great value for later down the road when I'm teaching. I will throw that note in there so that when I go back, just by pulling up the section, it's going to have those notes in there, and I can call to mind, N.T. Wright and his commentary of what 1 Corinthians for everyone said this that I thought was particularly interesting, that passage. It's interesting. I started doing that, by the way, during our studies on Corinthians, because it really helped for show prep to go through and read through and put those notes in there and certain parts that you wanted to highlight, and you could bring that up. So that's the main way I do that. And then if I'm, obviously if I'm going through and doing a sermon and any passage that I've added a note, if I happen over there, that note's going to be there for me. I had purchased, it's funny, you and I had talked about this, I had purchased the ESV Crossway Scriptural Paperback Journaling Bibles, which are each little book, most of them. And I like those, and I'll use those still for other things, but I'm not using them as much as I had been because Logos has kind of taken that over in a more powerful way. And there's infinite possibilities, by the way, of adding notes to these things. That's, I think, the thing that's really important to add to that is, whereas the journaling Bible, eventually I'm going to run out of space. On Logos, there's no limit, essentially, to the number of things I can add in all these texts. So it's particularly powerful. I'm not to the point where I take that on my iPad up into the class setting yet. That may be down the road to have that. I know that's what you do. I still kind of plan out where I'm going to go, but it makes it really provides a tremendous platform for preparation in the future, that you have all these notes of things that you've seen. And there's been some times, and I'm sure you do this too, where it's not in Logos necessarily, but maybe it's one of the books off my shelf that has something. I'll type that into the notes as well. It can do that as well, and add that in that way.
Yeah, and you can still add into your Logos library your own Word docs. It does a document import feature. It's not perfect, but you can do that. You can bring your entire document in. If you've got old notes that are in Word, you can bring those in. You can copy and paste your old stuff in other formats into these notes, which I do quite a bit. I take my old handwritten or hand-typed notes and add them in as we go through books that we're studying, kind of bring that old study work into the new table that I'm using to kind of work through stuff. want to add one more thing before we shift gears and talk about the most common question we got, which was how can I afford this better? And I think that's probably the most common one. Um, and that is just pausing for a moment and thinking about something that Mark Roberts and I talked about last week. He talked about the way he retains knowledge. And for him, at the end, one of the key things is if he writes it, he remembers it. And so if he hand writes it down, he has a higher likelihood of remembering it. And that is in the context of, well, this is all digital stuff. It's so easy to forget the progress we've made in how to use a tool because we don't write down our steps. Now, I totally do that. Like I've got handwritten notes for our web broadcast that Terry and I do that talk about how I solved problems. Like we had this problem. This is the step-by-step solution that I did that solved the problem. And I've got another list that's the step-by-step solution for starting the show to make sure we've done everything, make sure that the title is in the right spot, the verbiage is in the right spot, it's going to go to the right places. I've got a little list of that, and I check it every single time. In Logos, there's a feature I want to talk about that helps capture some of that. And so I'm going to talk about that real quickly before we shift. And it's a tool that is available. It is seen as a guide. And so if you're going into it, it's called a workflow. And you can create your own guide or workflow that accomplishes that same thing I just discussed. And so all you're doing is you're building a way that you do one thing every single time. And it's very sequential and very simple. So let's say my workflow is going to be about a preaching theme. And so the author is me, the description of whatever I'm going to do. And this is going to be, building theme. All right. And so that's what it's going to be. All right. So then you basically simply go through and I say our step number one, don't listen to Terry. All right. So that's number one on the list. And then you add the process that I use to go through it. So maybe this is a major step, or maybe I'm going to look at journals or particular passages or sermon outlines that are available through Logos. Whatever it is, none of that will come from Terry. And I'll have a reminder that says, don't listen to Terry. And then I'll continue to add through additional workflows. And so I'll add another major step. And this one will also be of value. Don't listen to Edwin. All right. So both of those things, they're just really simple. This is how you do a thing. This is the way you do it because it's the way you do this to be successful for you. The thing I like about Logos is that it allows it to be personal to your strengths and weaknesses. If you're really good in original languages, then include it in your process. But if that's not your strength, lean into those strengths to produce those outcomes. And apparently never listen to Terry, Edwin, or Philip about much of anything. I'll throw myself under the bus at the end on the back over phase. And so these little workflows you self-build, you self-produce, and then you follow. You're going to build a sermon, you do this. There are included workflows that they give you. So if you look in the guides and you go into the workflows, they're going to have a list of them. They're just kind of laid out. They even give you the classic workflow to understand a word and to do a basic word study. Last comments here before we get into the cost valuation stuff, Terry. I need to breathe, and so you need to talk.
Well, I don't know why you wouldn't listen to me anyway. So, yeah, let's get to cost. And I think this is important, by the way. So I'll start us off there. One of the things you've got to do when you go look at this, if you don't own Logos, you've got to go to their website. And when you see the sticker price, don't let that scare you. There are things that can be done that help with that. And I'm not typically somebody who advises people to do those kind of things, and I'm speaking specifically of spreading a payment out. But this is a situation where I think that's a valuable resource that they have, and that's something you can do through the Logos company. They offer payment plan options for a small service fee. It is very affordable, and so don't because the sticker shock the first time I looked at it was pretty huge. And I don't know if you felt that way too, Phil, but that was a long time ago. I was in my 20s, young kids, and you look at that price, you're like, there's no way. There's no way I can do that. And there is a way. And some of the payments are pretty low depending on the package. Now, so the thing that we would suggest, I think Phil and I are in agreement with that, is find a package that you're comfortable with. I personally think starting out anything above silver, maybe gold, starting out is probably not as necessary, because what I would suggest doing is buying a lower package like silver or bronze, and then slowly adding to it the materials, the resources that you see recommended that you find valuable. And that will allow you, as well as the free stuff. And one thing to see about the free stuff is every month there's a free book on Faith Life and on logos.com. So the first of the month you go in there, or if you're friends with Phil, a lot of times he'll just post that on Facebook to remind everybody to go. He's very good about that. But one of the other things that people don't realize is every month they also offer, I think is it 4 or 5 books, Phil? It's like $1.99, $2.99, $3.99. But they offer stuff that sometimes is as much as 70-80% off in that same page. I think it was last month, Phil, that we had the code for the $20, free $20 they gave out on their anniversary, if I remember correctly, or something like that. And basically, I got the free book, all of the specials on that same page for like less than $8, and that amounted to, I think, 5 or 6 pretty good resources that day. So what I'm saying is there's ways to do this kind of methodically. Right now, there's a Black Friday sale that a lot of books are $7.99. So that we were talking before we went live, the UBC set of commentaries, Understanding Bible Commentary. I think there's 3 or 4 of those volumes that are there for $7.99, which is a pretty good discount on those as well. So you just kind of watch the website. You buy a lower package, you watch the website, and you find the stuff that's affordable. Which, by the way, getting a commentary for $7.99 on your digital format is way cheaper than buying it in person, unless you just happen to see it on a clearance rack somewhere. So this is a more affordable all the way around. Is you could buy a lower package and you could add the things that you find more important as you go on. And then Phil can explain this better. We were talking about this, that as you add some of those free books, that actually lowers your price on an upgrade eventually.
So this is the way that works. They call it dynamic pricing. But the bottom line is, if you already own a thing, they're not charging you twice for a thing. And so if you own 5 volumes of a set, they're simply going to adjust the price of the rest of the set downward, equivalent to what you already own. And so if you're slowly buying parts of the New International Greek Testament commentary because you like a volume or another, eventually you'll buy the entire set. But you'll notice that as you get closer and closer to owning the set, they actually offer you an incrementally better deal on the rest of it. They lower the price on finishing the set. It's just something that how they've got their pricing set up.
And you will not pay twice for the same book. One of the things that comes up is if you already own something and it's like a special, you'll see it'll say 0 there because you already own it. So they're very good about that as well. I think to put your mind at ease, you'll never double pay, or I've never heard of that.
Right, and you own it, and you can transfer the rights to that book to another Logos user. You can sell it. You can sell your rights to that book too. And if they stop selling the book, you still own the book, and it still is serviced in your library. They're just no longer selling it anymore.
And can you, let me ask you this, Phil, for those, like my library behind me, a lot of those were handed down to me from my dad. And that's one of the reasons, as you and I have talked about, some of those books will never be given away or
Same with
sold
some of
because there's
these.
a tremendous sentimental value. In theory, Logos can be handed down somewhat. Is that
100%,
true?
yes.
Yeah,
You just there's a very small transfer fee to transfer a library. I think it's now $10 to
yeah,
change the registered owner of it, and so you can buy like, and you can sell off, you can give away part of your library or
right.
sell part of your library, and there's an individual transaction fee to change the rights to that. Um, you can even use it within a single home. And so if you're in the same home, you and your spouse can use it. You and your child can use it.
My son and I share my account. It's on his iPad, and I can be on my computer at the same time,
Right.
and we're both
Um,
using it, and there's no problems with that.
right.
So just to throw that
Um,
out there. It
you
works
know,
just like, I think that's the thing people understand is it works just like a library. I can go in and pick up a book off my shelf, and my son can. He can do the
right.
same thing in Logos. In fact, we could be looking at the same book, which is really even more powerful than what's on the shelf behind me.
By the way, we didn't cover this, and we might go back to it in a second because I just skipped by it for time. You can search in Logos by anything you could imagine. And so one of the things I do very often is simply search by a verse. And that verse results, the passage guide will pull up in my material that I own every single place that that verse is discussed directly. So all my major commentaries will come up. I
In
can
every
click on
book.
open, all of them open at once to that citation and survey them and then close them if I don't need them. Like, it's just a
It,
very simple process.
it turns into tab overload too. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that's pretty funny. But I tell you what, like the passage guy is like the most simple thing. You know, when you do that and you open up and you have all those commentaries that you could scroll through, the ones that you like, you just pull it up. I mean, it's so much better. For me, especially, let me say that one of the values of this is I'm in a hybrid work situation. I'm a caretaker for my mom who's on hospice. She's okay, at least right now, for a couple of hours in the morning. So that allows me to come to my office to have some peace. But I go home by lunch every day and I'm home. But with Logos, my library goes wherever I go. That's not the case with the books on my shelf. And that's, I think, in us being more a transient, more mobile society, that just adds to the power of this. That makes it so much better.
Yeah. Paul talks about something I'll mention in a second. I'm going to share again. We're going to go back on the cost thing because I want to point out something that's in that space about shared and cost value kind of things. Um, Pulling this back up again, that passage guide I just mentioned where you might pull out a verse. And so right now it's cited on Matthew 25:41. A friend had asked a question about it. My commentaries come up and you can prioritize them based on need. And so I very quickly shifted to, I want to see what was said about Matthew 25:41 in antiquity. And so now I have my oldest English reference to that text coming up. And so that will come up. Or medieval answers. Okay, now it moves up to there and it kind of cites those. If I go to contemporary commentaries, you can see I've got a lot of that. But a modern stuff that's inside of there, got a lot of that. And so that kind of helps me sort down the rest of the why do they answer these ways about this particular text. But they pulls them up. It pulls them up immediately. And all I have to do is click it, and there it is. And it's done. Like, the process is completed. It's there. I can quote and cite that to whatever standards of citation I need because it's about efficiency. Libronics takes your library and makes it efficient. Logos takes your library and makes it efficient. Um,
The other thing I would do there, by the way, is with that you can tag in. You see on the ESV, you have the orange A up there. You can tag all those commentaries. You can link them together to your ESV. So if you're in a text, let's say that was on Matthew 25, but you scrolled up to verse 44, then all your commentary is going to move with you at the same point, which
yeah.
is a very valuable tool as well. And then you're not constantly scrolling back and forth. So just a lot of neat little things like that seem so simplistic and elementary that we probably just assume everybody knows, that I think need to be pointed out, that we kind of, if we're not careful, we overlook.
Yeah. For Paul's comment about the accidental overwriting or shared note use, I use the little note icons to designate the kind of note that I'm putting on. And if it's a new note, I assign it a new icon until I assign it to its final destination. Whether it's going to be a summary of a text, whether it's going to be exposition of the text, whether it's going to be something specific to a sermon, it will eventually have an icon attached to it. But until it gets to the point of completion, it doesn't get an icon. It doesn't get a notification of, hey, don't mess with this anymore. That's my solution to that particular risk and problem. All right, so moving back into our cost thing. So the first thing to do is to take advantage of every free offering you can find. If they offer it for free, note that what you're doing is you're buying, or you're potentially moving to a point that when you buy, you're going to pay less because you already own part of the resources. So that's number one. Number two is don't overbuy. Terry already mentioned this. For the most part, bronze, silver is the first landing spot, whether it's an academic package or otherwise. Secondly, there are 2 or 3 ways you can reduce your price. One, they have sales year round. Anytime there's a big thing, they have a sale. March Madness, they have a sale. Black Friday, they have a sale. There'll be a Christmas sale. There'll be a New Year's sale. Always buy at a discount of 10% or more. It's just for the packages. Right now, there are combinations of discounts, and you can get a special price with a discount. And so that's a way to reduce the cost. And they have gift codes they give out on a regular basis that you can use. So that's the second thing. The third thing is in part mentioned by Ruben. There are different doorways into Logos. And one of them is an academic pricing guide. And so if you are a student or you work for a place where you have students, Logos considers you eligible for their academic pricing. So when you're a student, if you're going to preach, that's when you enter into your Logos world. And you try to budget appropriately to get you into that silver, bronze range at the cheapest buy-in. Because you're never going to beat that academic pricing. It's just cheaper. And so know that that's a step to lower that price. And if you're not happy with the price you see in the cart when you're about to hit send, stop, call Logos and say, hey, I'm looking at this. Is there any kind of pricing details that I don't know about? Sometimes, most of the time, they got a special. And so, I'll get to Paul's question in a second. It looks like a little more complicated tech thing, but I think I know some answers to it. But there's no perfect system. It is a cloud-based entity. And so, you always have to be cautious about it. So that's another thing you can do to kind of work your way into it over time. I wanted to highlight why Logos can be much less expensive than print books. And that's a key comparison. There's a book that I'm interested in. It's called Luke's Christology of Divine Identity. And so really technical doctoral level work that if I were to purchase it in print right now, the print purchases I've seen range from $100 to $200, depending on which edition you're getting. That's a lot of money for a single book, but most high-end academic books, they charge you that rate because of the way that doctoral stuff goes. Today, I could get it on Logos, regular price for $30. And so most printed work is generally the same price or cheaper in Logos. And I would say most of the time it's cheaper or significantly cheaper in Logos. And so one of the key barriers to entry is our price rebellion. We're already invested into books. And so investing into libraries that are digital seems like a second purchase. Don't do that. If you already order it in print, don't buy it in digital unless you're going to sell the print. But if you're going to buy a new book, it's almost always going to be cheaper if you purchase it in a digital format. And so if you're going to buy the book, you're probably going to save money buying it just by itself in Logos, which you can absolutely do, which falls into the category of don't overbuy. There's no reason to buy the package. If you're already going to use all your print work, buy the stuff you're adding. Learn the software, learn its advantages, work with it in that context. And not everyone wants to be a early adopter and sell their print books. I realize that that's not everybody, and it shouldn't be. Some people are much more comfortable working in print space. Keep doing it. But it's all, you can actually do a spreadsheet if you wanted to and figure out that if you sell your print library, I guarantee you can buy more digital library dollar for dollar than you own in print books if you purchase in Logos, Accordance, or wherever, or even Kindle, which is a bad choice. But if people like it, they like it. Terry, last comments. I'm trying to digest Paul's question real quick and give him an answer.
Well, I think one of the things that is really important about Logos is, regardless of where you're at on the whole spectrum of this, there's great value in it. You could be somebody who's not as advanced in languages and even as advanced. Phil's going after his higher degrees in some of this. I'm not. We're on the different ends of the spectrum on some of that stuff, but we both find great value in this software. And I think that's the main thing, regardless of where you're at on all of that. There's still a lot of value to this for you, and it will help you understand some things that otherwise you would not be able to.
Right. And so to Paul's thing, absolutely. And I would just say, he's talking about how you can overwrite your notes at times because of the status of the most recent record of it. That can happen a lot if you're working with two devices that are not presently connected to the cloud. Then it will pick whichever one has the latest date to it to sync over the top of everything else. And that's not just a Logos issue. That's just a cloud-based data recording issue. Some programs are really good about it, and they make 2 copies. Some are not good at all.
I just don't overwrite my notes. And I know that sounds simplistic, but I avoid all that by, there may be 3 symbols next to a verse or a word, and I'm okay with that.
Right. And then eventually you delete the one you don't want. Like if you realize,
Right.
Hey, this is something better, I'll put another icon to it. It's the way to solve it.
Correct.
Regards to Edwin's question, just put a TV monitor up there and have it rotate your library from Logos, and then people will think you're studious as they see all the books that are available to you. And there's so many more books available than there used to be, and your library is clean. But of course, that may mean your brain is just not doing anything.
I just think that allows you to fill your shelves with more premium Bibles, which is a whole nother episode.
Right, and Wheaties boxes,
sports memorabilia.
Yeah. So I think there's some of this is dealing with what is efficient for the process, because Logos is about efficiency in the end. If folks have specific questions about where to get things or how to get to stuff, head on to that, links there and send us some messages. We'd be happy to answer your questions. If you want to talk more in detail about a specific feature, then happy to set a time where we can do that individually. I want to plug a couple of things that aren't what I do to help maybe give each of you who are really interested in getting better at it some skills. Number one, Morris Proctor has a package of both videos, courses, and what he calls Camp Logos that is excellent. And so if you really want to get good at it, I highly encourage you to go to one of his Camp Logoses. I think there's one near the end of the year in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Excellent investment of your time. Option number two is there's a ton of free how-to videos, both on YouTube, on the Logos page, and in Morris Proctor's stuff that walk you through almost every question you may have. Like, how do I do this? It literally step-by-steps you through those things. They're free and they're available. And so I encourage you to get a hold of that free stuff. And if you don't know where to find it, I'm going to try to link a bunch of links in the show notes afterwards for the Facebook page and the YouTube page that links to all of this. We've exceeded our time allotted because Edwin has his Bible on his phone. But Terry, last around the horn moment, stuff going on, what encouragement you have for folks? We haven't done that in a while. I think it's probably a good time to do it again.
Well, first, I think we decided last week we might have announced that we will not be here next Tuesday. I think that's we're taking the week off for Thanksgiving week. So just so everybody knows, we'll be back after next week. So just if you come to look for us, we won't be here.
Mhm.
Just keep in mind, there's a lot of people that are hurting right now. There's for a lot of reasons. Mindful of Nicaragua and Honduras, who just got slammed this morning by a very powerful hurricane, and they had not recovered from the last one. There are brethren there that I'm sure are in some pretty dire circumstances. So let's be praying for them, and if we can hear of any help that may be needed at some point, we'll share that with you guys. So if you're able to do that, that'd be great. A lot of other things. I think just a lot of prayers for our country. It's the holidays. The year's been tough. We're all fatigued with elections and COVID and everything else. And if you're not careful, the response to that can be to just kind of give up and throw in the towel and just be vigilant and check on your brethren, encourage them. I think the main thing just to encourage everybody is to be an encourager today. Look for something that you can say to lift somebody up, to encourage them, to help them during what's been a really tough time.
Yeah, I want to echo exactly where Terry's at and extend it a little bit. Over the last 2 weeks, he and I both have learned of a number of our friends and brethren who have been suffering through different stages of their own journey through COVID. And I want to encourage people to do something a little bit different. I know that we live in a world that makes it nervous to talk about this, almost like we're having some sort of don't test, don't tell mentality about COVID. That's an unhealthy thing to do.
Yeah.
On a spiritual level, it's not healthy. You need the prayers of your brethren and you need someone to talk about things. But that also means that those who see those messages respond with compassion no matter where you live in response to it. Like maybe you had it and it wasn't bad for you. Maybe you had it, it was horrible for you. There's a lot of apprehension about this particular condition and disease that we should be encouraging folks about, not discouraging them from feeling like they can talk about it.
Yeah.
And so if you had the lightest case, wonderful news that maybe that means that you're living in a place where now you're more safe and you can interact more with other folks. If you had an awful experience with it and you've lost family, that's a horrible thing. We need to be compassionate to both ends of that spectrum and be encouraging across the board.
We need to promote peace and positivity during this time. That's really the theme of this. You can't see it, but back behind the bobbleheads, there's a picture of me and my son, Lindy McDaniel. Lindy passed away this week from complications with COVID, and Lindy was a good friend and encourager to me personally. And his wife is a close friend of ours. In fact, I did their wedding ceremony. He met her in Memphis. And so that's a very close to home personal loss for me and for my family. And I know our story is just one of a lot of other people's. So just, the reality is we need to, like I said, promote things that create peace, lift people up. And our tendency is to do the opposite because of our frustration and our fatigue. And I think at this time, especially, just try to choose your words carefully. If you can't, we're in a time where we can't hug somebody maybe safely physically, but we can, in the truest virtual sense, send hugs and comfort to as many people as possible. And that's, I think, what we need to be doing.
Yep. Thank you everyone for joining in today. If you've got questions about stuff, let us know. You can connect us in all the different ways. Hope you have a great day and take care.